Thank you very much indeed for inviting me to this extraordinary session. And I'm so glad perhaps I'm the last speaker here, which has some advantages because Dr. Chidambaram and Dr. Brahmachari and Dr. Partha Majumdar have covered a lot of history in terms of the journey of science and technology in India, as well as where we might possibly be heading. So I would actually latch on to where we possibly be heading, rather than the history, but then of course the future is only a modified history. So there are some lessons from there, and essentially what I would like to talk about very quickly is what are the overarching structure and the processes and the architecture of doing science and technology with some effectiveness and quality. And what are the new challenges which are coming at us at ever faster rate? Of course, if we were to look at things that happened in last 75 years in India, one way to look at them would be to look sector-wise, to say, look, what happened in transport, where were we, where are we now? And that is a compelling journey indeed. If we were to enumerate some of the stuff that was impactful, it came out of science, technology, and innovation. I would always speak of science and technology and innovation in the same breath. And the reason for that is that the transforming science, the bridge of science to society is through technology and innovation. So if we were to look at education, of course, we set up these great institutions, making a huge impact both for Indian economy and in fact globally so. And policies have played a very important role, and the latest one is National Education Policy 2020. If we could implement half of it, we would be through. Of course, you look at food, water, sanitation. There have been so many revolutions, green, white, yellow, blue, and now coming to the blue revolution, which is basically mapping and looking at the resources of the oceans. Sulabh, Har Ghar Jal, Swachh Bharat, tractor, for example, and even pumps. This is basically what got us where we are now in health and medical, family planning, ASHA, generic drugs, vaccines, and COVID-19 time showed us a whole lot of ventilators and diagnostics that came up really, really quickly, building on the foundations that we had laid over decades. Jaipur food, Shri Chitrahat, really, there are lots and lots of this stuff over there. I may also add to it the open drug discovery platform that was championed by Dr. Um, in the CSIR, Dr. Brahmachari, which was a very compelling aspect of looking at health and medical for the future. Three-wheelers, e-rickshaws, metros that came up quickly, and so on. And then, of course, we can look at things which have happened with so rapidly in information and communication technologies, the rise of digital. This is the industry 3.0. In a sense, we pole vaulted, we leapfrogged, and it was very hard to have, in fact, um, a phone line at your home at one point. And now we got everybody's got this stuff in their pocket, riding on it. The knowledge network that was set up by Dr. Chidambaram when he was PSA, National Supercomputing Mission. Whole lot of stuff is happening there: cyber physical systems, quantum technologies, and stuff. In terms of governance, a whole lot of examples are given. Ink that we use for voting, voting machines, advisories and warnings which are delivered to our fishermen and farmers, and every time before there's a tornado and what have you, saving lives. Giving a digital identity through UID and Aadhaar, and then going for direct benefit transfer, plugging in a lot of leakages, new policies on deregulating, on liberalization and democratization, on mapping, on drones. These are our very latest vintage. Satellite imaging in terms of opening up the space sector, the defense sector, and so on. In basically imaging an Atmanirbhar Bharat through all of these interventions. Innovation ecosystem has really come up very rapidly in the last 7, 8 years, 10 years maybe. It was very hard to convince my PhD students more than 10 years ago to do anything with the startups. But they are flowing freely. Even the grassroots innovation and the traditional knowledge find their own space in all of this. Of course, energy, things like ultra, advanced, supercritical, again championed by Dr. Supercritical, solar, and nuclear. A whole lot of this has been contributed by Dr. Chidambaram and the teams that went around. So all of this, you see, all of this is common knowledge. So we can, there are chapters devoted to each one of these. There are books which are devoted to each one of these. So there's, one can't really go very deeply into this, saying, look, of course, the fact is that we built upon the strong foundations that were laid in terms of our human resources, in terms of our infrastructure, in terms of training of science and technology personnel. So where are we now? The good news and what are our reasons for optimism looking at the future? We are number three globally in terms of number of scientific papers, which includes a lot of cutting edge areas, engineering, nanotechnology, in materials, even in artificial intelligence. India is number three in number of startups and even unicorns. And like I said, well, if you look 10 years ago, we were number 10 in number of scientific papers. The startups and unicorns were unheard of. Now, India has deep strengths in R&D and its R&D institutions from universities to IITs to R&D labs and so on. Demography is a huge plus. We are a young country of educated young people, energetic young people that are basically are ready for action. They are looking for action and they are ready for action. The human resources, very deep strengths in there, and enabling policies, and of course, the very diversified markets and demand, which nobody can ignore, which basically means, India is a diverse country. In fact, Partho talked about it from a different perspective, which is actually good, which basically means that there is a space for all sorts of science, technology, and innovation to satisfy the demands of this market. Just to tell you, even simple biomedical devices today, about 80% of them are imported. And there's absolutely no reason at all that this could not be done very rapidly and on scale. Of course, there's always a but. So we must also focus on the but going forward in the future. So while we may be okay being at number three in terms of quantity of scientific papers, one has to focus on their quality and their impact, on their relevance and their direction, because without relevance and direction, they are not going to connect anywhere. And this is especially true of applied sciences, of technology, of engineering, of markets and society at large. There is, of course, the perpetual conflict between the profound and incremental, between disruptive and business as usual. Are we looking at leadership in some areas, many areas of science and technology, or being contended as being followers of the latest fashion and the trends that come from somewhere else? In other words, do we have any India-centric ideas? Of course, when we're looking at basic sciences, we are looking at the conflict between profound and incremental. When we are looking at applied sciences and maturing to technology and markets, we are looking at India-centric problems. So it is something like local, while science or very fundamental science may be global, its transformation into applications is often local, which is to have understanding of what actually who we are and what our problems are, where the gaps are. And those gaps are to be filled with innovation, which of course is a new mantra that more and more people understand and operate on. That connects of science to all its stakeholders, and of course industry and society are some of the gap areas that going forward in the future, that one would have to focus very tightly. So this talk is not about a particular problem or area of S&T that we, of course, that if I work in some area, I go to a particular conference. and I read certain papers and know all about it. It's not about what the future technologies would be or specific products or technology and what their shape would be. So, what is it about? It's a broad picture of the drivers and directions of science and technology globally, and of course, in the Indian context, and how it's going to impact us. What are the emerging challenges and opportunities of the future? And what are the structure and processes of the mind that can understand those challenges, not only understand challenges, but can leverage them? So when we talk about of science and technology and its directions and determinants, and that basically tells us not the specifics, but it tells us what is it that we would expect. It could image the future. And of course, extrapolating from these directions, we can even come to some specific products and so on. So in a broad brush picture, let us first start with where actually science and technology comes from. What are the drivers? And of course, the fortunes of science and technology have been very greatly intertwined with various industrial revolutions. And it works both ways. So that while science affects technology, technology affects science through its tools that develop. And at the same time, both of them impact society, but society's will in turn works on the directions that flourish in science, applied sciences and their applications. So the first time actually I came across the different hierarchical needs of the mind was in Psychology 101 in my BTech program. And of course, this is the famous Maslow's motivational model. What is it that the mind wants? And that actually tells us what kind of stuff in knowledge would actually come and flourish. We all know that there is such a thing as, um, nothing happens until it is an idea whose time has come. So if we were to look at the base of this pyramid, it's about psychological needs, about needs for safety, it's about needs for belonging and love and connecting, it's about esteem. Together, all of these needs are called deficiency needs. If we move up this hierarchy, now I don't mean when we say move up that there is something extraordinary about those and that they are more important in some sense. That is actually something which is a moot point. But anyway, going up the pyramid, these are called growth needs, cognitive needs, aesthetic needs, need of self-actualization, whatever that may mean, and the need for transcendence, whatever that may mean. But in a sense, we understand intuitively actually what these things mean. Now, very interestingly, the idea that came to my mind at some point is saying, look, all of science and technology today, the modern science and technology, is actually addressing very compellingly, no doubt, the needs which are called deficiency needs. It was not always like that. So if you were to look at pre-industrial societies, they didn't have a whole lot of technology. They may have technology which is evolving slowly, and then this trying to fulfill these very basic needs about roti, kapda, and makan, so to say, in a metaphorical way. Um, but they were actually a whole lot of more focus on the needs that are called growth needs. So in a sense, this is the internal world of the mind, and there is an external world of the mind. And while technology is very good at satisfying the deficiency needs, in the modern times, it has not kept pace equally well with satisfying the growth needs. Sometimes it may even be reversed. Whole lot of technologies that actually do a wonderful job, extraordinary job of satisfying deficiency needs, in fact, may have a negative impact on the growth needs. Now, there's something that we wish to remember, but anyhow, as we come to further discussion. So now coming to, okay, what kind of technology might be up there in the horizon? What are India-centric, expansion plans and growth and development and so on? This is a very nice report. This is called Technology Vision 2035. The last one was Technology Vision 2020, which was championed and steered by none other than Dr. Abdul Kalam. Some of those stuff has come true, some of it has not come true, and this is about the future. Predictions are very hard, especially about the future. But anyhow, this is a good starting point, which actually tells us where are we going in terms of technology, where we need to go, where we are. There are also sectoral reports related to transport, health, energy, water, and all of those things. So if we have a little bit more interest, depending on the area in which I work, it would be worthwhile to spend few hours with these reports. Okay, now looking at the future. Of course, the best way to predict the future is to invent it, and we have learned that in lessons of COVID-19 about problem solving, about being interdisciplinary and multidisciplinary. Whole lot of actually, I hear it all the time. Of course, I heard it 20 years ago as well. Of course, that our structures and processes in universities, IITs, anywhere, they are not very friendly in terms of being multidisciplinary, interdisciplinary, beyond disciplinary, out of disciplinary, transdisciplinary, whatever we may call it. Even today, if I wanted to hire a chemical engineer in physics department, it would be 200% impossible to do that. But anyway, forget about that particular aspect. More of it is happening, I have no doubt, and more of it would happen because of the demands of problem solving. Now, of course, we have fragmented knowledge, scientific knowledge, in thousands of different ways. And these fragments were necessary in order to have growth in a specialized sector. It was also necessary for undergraduate teaching to give an identity, and so that that identity qualifies one for a particular job. But if you were to move to higher education, starting from PhD and beyond and research, to my mind, all of science, technology, whatever we call it, can be divided into five M's of doing business. The first one is mechanics, which is understanding of everything, how things happen, why things happen, classical to quantum, from electronics to chemical to mechanical to what have you. Materials, of course, and the rise of materials has been unprecedented. Machines is basically putting together the final thing, device, a system, a bundle, if you would, that would do the job. And of course, all of this would be meaningless without manufacturing. Okay, manufacturing is a science, but paid very scant attention in all of this. While materials, machines, and mechanics have found their place, manufacturing is still considered kind of low science and technology, which it is not so. And the final M is man or woman for that matter. And what that means is that all of this science and technology is not a standalone activity, that this is not something which is done for its own sake, but it is done for the fact that man has to be at the center. Its needs and priorities are to be projected and to be fulfilled in some way through science, technology, and innovation. The next frontier of science, technology, and innovation, whole lot of it lies with the nature-inspired science and technology, not just in materials, but in processing and tools, in fabrication and manufacturing, how it happens in nature, completely different from man-made manufacturing. Devices and machines, functions and mechanisms, and indeed the principles and the wisdom by which everything is organized. So there's a whole lot of gold mine out there, and really not even a tip of this iceberg has been seen or leveraged. To give you an example about materials, where are materials going? Now we hear a lot about responsive materials, stimuli responsive materials, functional materials, nanomaterials, smart materials, even intelligent materials. And all of that is true. But of course, the next wave of materials would lead to information embedded materials, knowledge embedded materials, which means that the materials are able to decide based on stimuli and so on about how to grow, how to shrink, how to divide, how to multiply, and what kind of functions would be appropriate. So this is something that I have copyrighted. Is saying, is the next wave going to be conscious materials? So that we are running seminars and conferences that are called ConMat. Would we have wise materials? Would we even have spiritual materials, conscious materials, what have you? So this is a fantastic area really to work in. But what is fantastic about this area is not just materials, but the convergence of materials with something larger than itself, bringing it closer to how it happens in nature. Now, if we were to look at some simple functions in nature, very, very simple examples. We have structural colors, very vibrant colors in nature, which are not duplicated by man-made colors. There is the self-cleaning water repellent surfaces like the lotus leaf, which are also called fakir droplet sometimes, which means like a fakir sitting on the bed of nails and not really touching it. Even Buddha said long time ago to live in the world, be like a lotus leaf, connected to muck, but growing so beautifully and clean. Low temperature ceramics. All the man-made ceramics are made at extreme conditions of high pressure and temperature. But look at ceramics which are made in nature. Fantastic manufacturing path, bioadhesion. Look at the frogs and the gecko and insects that can modulate the strength of their adhesion and walk around forever, which means reversible, usable adhesion. Now, all of these things, they are, of course, a particular class, very simple examples, and there are infinite such examples. In fact, the examples I've shown over here, there is no very good man-made material of this kind. And in fact, these five examples, they don't depend on the chemical nature. The four examples, at least, they don't depend on the nature of the material, which may then depend on the chemistry, depends on the physics, which is very interesting because the functionalities of color, water repellency, adhesion, they all come from the micro and nanostructures which are present on the surfaces of these materials. So therefore, they can be replicated in any material, whether it's metal to polymers to anything else. Where is manufacturing going? The manufacturing, of course, Industry 4.0 is the new mantra for manufacturing, and which is basically the convergence of communication, computing, and the machines and autonomous actions that happen in there. But if you another very compelling theme for manufacturing is the distributed manufacturing, personal manufacturing, point of need manufacturing, nature inspired manufacturing, and so on. And a whole lot of that, the first wave actually is coming and stabilized with 3D printing and similar kind of technologies. But this should become actually as pervasive as personal computing, for example. From personal computing to personal manufacturing is but a short step, and that step is going to happen. Now, I was very intrigued. I was very interested in what Partho talked about from a particular perspective about diversity. But if you were to look at nature, nature values diversity. This is one of the wisdoms of nature. If you would, it may tolerate suboptimality, but it would never tolerate lack of diversity. Now, why is that? Because things evolve in different circumstances, in different environments, and so on. If we were all clones of each other, no matter how optimal we are, the first virus, COVID, would have actually finished all of us simultaneously. So diversity is the framework, which is a bulwark against any changing circumstances, if you would, and is a robust framework. And so therefore, the diversity, I'm so happy that India is such a diverse country, that the meaning of life actually is diversity. And it produces new opportunities, no doubt. And those are the opportunities that we need to fill with science and technology. Now, come back to the same picture again. I don't know why. Okay, but we talked about the deficiency needs and growth needs. And it's very interesting, like I said, that technology more and more addresses the deficiency needs, which is good, no doubt. But we have made one fundamental mistake somewhere in the long march of science and technology. And that fundamental mistake is that we have said, look, if we satisfied the deficiency needs, in fact, even if we over satisfied the deficiency needs in terms of, let's say, consumption and so on, then somehow the growth needs will be automatically taken care of. In other words, we said consumption equals happiness. This is a total misunderstanding, and this misunderstanding is actually of a very recent origin, maybe 2 centuries perhaps no more. And this is something which gives us actually a new way of thinking about where we could get our science and technology moving in the future. Okay, so what is a fountainhead of future? Is basically clearly what the mind wants: to be healthy, to have quality of life, to be connected with equality, to learn and apply that learning to make decisions in complexity. And that's the reason that we get all this machine learning, neural technologies, neural nets, and what have you, to be entertained. As a metaphor, even most of the meetings, that we go to, they also have an entertainment component actually in there. Meetings that could be finished in 5 minutes without a cup of tea are actually extended for 1 hour. Let us not forget the human aspect of the science and technology that we do to have better life, to be happy, whatever that means, to find fulfillment, to create and control my own world. This is very important because the real world doesn't offer this luxury. Of course, through science and technology, we have gained control, a much greater control of the world surrounding us than before it. But even if you look at the rise of virtual reality, mixed reality, augmented reality, whole of that would actually become so much more pervasive in the decades to come. I'm afraid that some people would start living in that reality totally. I know so many teenagers, even me, I was hooked on to actually a video game. I'm not very proud of it, but I would be playing it until 3 a.m. in the morning, just totally ignoring the next class at 8 a.m. in the morning. So there are certain things in the mind which hook on to the world that we create and control and fight with. To live long, maybe forever. And of course, that we said happiness does not equal consumption. It doesn't even equal all the technology that we can marshal to satisfy our deficiency needs. Okay, I would skip that because we're already running a little bit late. But actually, to understand how science and technology evolved and where it is going, we have to look at actually the evolution of different kinds of industry, starting from industry zero, which is controlled by the flow of muscle, to things which are controlled by centralized industry, controlled by flow of materials, energy, machines. But 4O and beyond industry is largely controlled by flow, ownership, and control of data, information, and knowledge, and greater integration of 5 M's of science and technology that I talked about. Let's quickly talk about the overarching challenges. By overarching, I mean those which would be all pervasive, which means that they would impact every aspect of our life, from dating to food, to what I think, what I should think, and so on, and how I basically lead my life. The first challenge is the rise of intelligent machines, which today we can describe as the convergence between cyber and digital on one side and physical on the other. In other words, the convergence of materials, machines, communication, perception through sensors, computing at the edge, distributed computing, making autonomous decisions through the tools of artificial intelligence, have managing control actions and autonomous action through actuators. Add to that, if you were to go into the next society and industry, it will also integrate the biological in its fold. A lot of this is already happening, either cyber physical getting into biological or biological getting into cyber physical. All of that is happening, and this is such a fascinating topic on which one can actually have conferences and talk about for nearly 10 hours or 100 hours for that matter. So all of this is happening. Internet of Things, robotics, cobotics, quantum technologies, by many different names that they are known. Okay, why is it overarching? It's overarching because it is because of the convergence of different streams of knowledge coming around seamlessly, and they impact learning to skills to education to work to governance to our experience and entertainment, our health, judiciary, law, commerce, medicine, privacy, or our concepts of privacy and governance, undergoing huge tectonic changes, safety, media, equalities and justice or the lack of them. Challenge number two, again, an overarching challenge, which is called sustainable development. Is it an oxymoron? Certainly, the way we view development today and the way we view sustainability, sustainable development together, they are pulling in two different directions. It is an oxymoron. We can think about, can we actually solve the problem of sustainable development by science and technology alone? While an optimist would probably say that, a realist actually would say no, because it's got many different pillars. Science and technology certainly is a necessary pillar of that. But on top of that, it is the wisdom and the will of society that matters. Why do I say that? Because you see, technology, when it addresses sustainability, it is sustainability per GDP. And what that means is I would reduce emissions per GDP by having a more efficient technology, but I would not be able to reduce emissions because the total consumption is increasing. Absolutely no doubt about that. Okay, so there are sustainable development goals, 17 of them, and we can connect each sub goal with a particular branch or particular problem of science and technology and innovation. And this is all about problem solving. Is saying, look, how do we move from being tool centric to being problem centric? I would just like to bring in a little bit human touch into this whole problem of science and technology and innovation. So I'm very fond of quoting this that I encountered by chance. I was saying I used to think that top environmental problems were biodiversity loss, ecosystem collapse, and climate change. I thought that with 30 years of good science, we could address those problems. But I was wrong. The top problems are selfishness, greed, and apathy. And to deal with those, we need a cultural transformation at the deepest seat of consciousness, if I may add. And we scientists don't know how to do that. By the way, what he's saying about scientists is true for every section of society. Okay, so that's where we are on that. Okay, challenge number three is lost in translation syndrome. So a whole lot of our science and technology is actually confined to what we may call labs and so on, to certain groups which read each other's papers in highly specialized journals, all of which is necessary for the growth of knowledge. But the whole point is, is there a balance between invention and innovation? Is there a balance between creation of knowledge and dissemination of that knowledge, transmission of that knowledge to all the stakeholders that can benefit by it? You see, here I have a camera, which is a smart camera, which is driven by machine learning. So it keeps pulling me out all the time, no matter if I want to do it or not. This is related to lights and shadows of technology all the time. So while we focus tightly on the lights of a technology, we forget the nexus and life cycle and the interaction with the proximal technologies, which may produce huge shadows in the long run. Challenge number three or four is therefore the innovation. It is about completing the circle of knowledge. Now, just like everything should be sustainable, physical things should be sustainable, the knowledge also has to be sustainable in the society. And there are two parts of that knowledge ecosystem for it to be sustainable that have to act in harmony and balance. These two parts are invention, discovery on one hand, and innovation on the other. Now, a whole lot of people I meet, about more than 70% scientists themselves, students, and so on, they don't understand the meaning of innovation. So I would just very quickly go through it. So invention is about producing new knowledge. It's about also part of that is diffusing and disseminating that knowledge. Essentially, invention is what we do as scientists in R&D labs, in universities, IITs, what have you. It requires resources, it requires budget, it requires money, it requires all of that to produce knowledge and to transmit that knowledge. That's invention and discovery. Innovation is 180-degree opposite of that, is mathematically orthogonal to invention, but it completes the circle of knowledge. How? Well, innovation, the input is knowledge. And what comes out from this black box called innovation are the new socioeconomic opportunities, in other words, growth. So, invention requires resources producing knowledge, whereas innovation takes that knowledge and convert it into new opportunities. So, therefore, these two things working together, as a liberal metaphor, I could say Saraswati and Lakshmi working together by having a respect and understanding of each other's goals is basically what completes the goals of the society. Okay, so I not we are running short on time. There are a whole lot of things happening in the innovation space, and people have much better opportunities and understanding of what you can take forward there. Uh, Again, because not enough time to have a deep analysis of actually where we fail in innovation, how we fail in innovation, and so on. Now, any of you have interest in startups and innovation, please drop me an email. I'll be very happy to share actually all the insights regarding this, and where are we moving in it, what are the opportunities and threats. Overarching challenge 4 in science and technology and innovation is about inclusion, diversity, demography, globalization, and poverty. The young and restless, how do they get engaged? Now, of course, diversity and inclusion is not, of course, gender is one aspect of it, which is a 50% aspect of it. I've never seen a very good bicycle which doesn't run on two wheels, maybe only in circus. Bicycles run on one wheel. But of course, diversity and its inclusion and equity is also equally about the socioeconomic background, is about geography, it's about gender, it's about education, it's about language, it's about what have you. So it is basically empowering the science and technology ecosystem of the future. All of these muscles have to be included and empowered so that they can actually have they bring in different perspectives, they bring in different ideas, they bring in basically greater participation of all the stakeholders. Often I have seen men, they think that, well, if there were more women in all of this and all these people, that there would be less opportunities for men. That's such a silly idea that I don't even have to counter it. Because as you have more empowered people in the system, the basket, the size of basket also goes up. So therefore, the opportunities that we work with, they also enlarge in the same proportion. Okay, the final challenge that I call the last great frontier is not space, it is mind. The challenge 5 is, very soon, increasingly, we will ask what differentiates humans from machines. And of course, a manual task, cognitive task, creative task, pattern recognition. In all of this, machines are vastly superior and they are catching up even in creative tasks. I have seen the art that artificial intelligence tools create. I have seen the poems, even the novels. Okay, I can guarantee you that within 20 years, it's not only about beating the world chess champions. There is no hope there at all. But any kind of pattern recognition, in other words, doing all sorts of science which is based on pattern recognition, whether it is drug discovery, whether it is material science, whether it is fluid mechanics, whether it is making, finding the options, the best decisions, best governance, what have you. All of them would actually, or financial markets, trading, what have you, all of that is going to be outsourced to machines. Okay, so the last great frontier, if you would, to my mind, is the science and technology of brain, consciousness, happiness, and fulfillment. Why can't we have science and technology of happiness? I mean, after all these technology tools that we are working with, they must have an objective. And what is the overarching objective, if you were to ask me or anybody else for that matter, is of course the fulfillment and happiness. So, why don't we cut the chase and we say, look, let us get down to what this is all about, what the existence is all about. And of course, even how do we understand things? Not clear to me. The final frontier, the big questions. in which there is going to be a lot more of science and technology investment in the decades to come and centuries to come, in fact, is the riddles of existence, perception. Perception is not a simple thing, it's not purely mechanical. Brain, mind, awareness, consciousness, self consciousness, and so on, and the connectedness of everything. Look, every time I drew what is called a free body diagram in physics, I had some kind of suspicion. I had some kind of, unsatisfied query or a puzzle. And I said, is that really true that I can predict actually when I drop a ball as to when it's going to hit the floor and how high it would jump? Certainly, assuming the rest of the universe remained static. So preparing the ground for the science and technology of the future is basically shift from tool-centric to problem-centric, emphasis on integration and synthesis and not only on analysis, on creativity, connecting the dots, even scientific common sense and intuition. And it's all about the convergence and co-arising. It's about understanding and negotiating the change, which is very interesting. We saw it in COVID-19 times. Interesting thing about negotiating and understanding change is basically that the human mind, it changes slowly, linearly changes with a small slope, whereas technology could be a little bit different. So technology could be disruptive, exponential, and rapid. So whole problem is how does society and individual mind actually negotiate change? And then, of course, going from invention to innovation and so on. So a brief history of the future is about convergence. It is about understanding the deep drivers and directions of science and technology, which lay in understanding minds, needs, demands, wants, desires, and greed. These demands cannot be fulfilled with technology alone. It needs a balancing act. There are lights and shadows of technology. Technology is a good servant, but it will take control. That's one part. The second part is that humans will willingly and happily relinquish more and more of that control because of the so-called efficiency and lethargy. So it is time to focus on the higher needs through science and technology. If I were to say yoga and meditation, whole lot of people say, what I'm talking pseudoscience, what I'm talking about, and so on. Okay, well, okay, you be the judge. But anyhow, you see, no body of knowledge is ever static. And if we were to have growing science and technology, which means evidence-based, logic and so on, data-based stuff, figuring out things, scientific temper, this cannot be limited only to what we consider to be science and technology. It would not solve our deeper problems that we belabor actually for individuals and for society that we want to see in the future centuries, the life on planet Earth. Right. So this my take-home message that quality science, profound science, science with direction and relevance, and the translation of that science, science is reaching the different stakeholders of it. Now, I'm not saying that the same scientist and same person is responsible for all of these. No, certainly not. Certainly not. Point is, do we have an ecosystem that is able to cater to different functionalities that we want from our science and technology? And do they work actually together to make it all possible? Thank you very much. I would stop here. That's my last slide um, about science, life, and everything else. Thank you.